Hi, hey, how's it going? It's Emily, and today I'm going to be doing my April wrap-up. Obviously a little bit late. It's fine. I just did my March one, and I just wanted to make sure I was caught up on wrap-ups. April was owls, and I successfully completed all of my owls. I'm officially a magizoologist, so if you ever need any of your magical creatures cared for, I got you. And I had a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a good reading month overall. So I'm just gonna start. I normally write out a lot of thoughts about all of the books and have everything a little bit more organized and together, but I really just want to get this filmed while I have an opportunity to. So this one's probably going to be a little rougher than some of my other wrap-ups, but it's fine. So the first things that I read in April were part of the Invisible Library series. So I read The Invisible Library and The Masked City by Genevieve Cogman, and just hold up the first one. So this one actually was technically the second one that I was using for an owl's prompt. This was for herbology, which the prompt was to read a book that started with an M, or the title started with an M, and this was one of very few options that I had. So this series follows Irene, and she is a librarian for a really badass library. It's kind of in a place outside of space and time, and this library can connect to different, they're called alternates, basically just different alternate realities. They can connect to these different realities, and the librarians are kind of librarian spy combos, and they go into these different alternates to retrieve text, and there might be different reasons why they're going into a particular alternate to get a particular text. Maybe it's a different version of something that's different than it might be in any other alternate, or there could be a lot of reasons why these librarians go to retrieve these texts, and having those texts in the library kind of strengthens the library's connection to that alternate. So Irene has a new mission from the library, and she also has a new apprentice that she's training named Kai, and so this basically follows her going to a different alternate, trying to retrieve a text, but when she gets there, she realizes that the text has already been stolen, so she needs to find it and kind of figure out what's going on. She kind of gets caught up in the politics that's kind of going on between two different groups, and the Masked City actually kind of follows directly from the events of this one, and continues on. So it's not like a different kind of mission that she's going on in each book, at least so far. I've only read the first two, but it seems like perhaps the whole series, this is kind of one overarching story. But this one follows directly after the events of the first one, and as things are happening, she needs to kind of figure out what's going on and actually get the text back and be able to get it to the library. So this one is fun. I honestly really enjoyed these. The writing style was very kind of plain and simple, and it's just like a fun, relatively fast-paced story. I don't think it's going to be a favorite series of all time, I think, or anything, at least from what I have so far, but I have actually thoroughly enjoyed my time reading it while I am reading it. It's just not something I've really thought about a lot outside of that. I do really thoroughly enjoy the concept of these books though, and just getting to know more about the library and the secrets of the library and kind of how it works and why it is the way it is. That's been really cool, and I think that's probably my favorite part of reading this series. But yeah, so that was what I needed for herbology. I also listened to Fire by Kristen Kishore. This is the second book after Graceling, and it's a companion novel. It's a series of 3 companion novels, and this one doesn't follow a character. So Fire is not a character that's actually in Graceling. She's in a completely different part of the world, and there are monsters and that kind of has a particular meaning. We follow Fire, who is a monster who can help control the emotions of other people, and she gets kind of tied up in a bunch of politics that's on this other side of the world, and it's kind of cool to kind of see how it starts to interact with the other part of the world that we've learned about in Graceling. And the next one is Bitter Blue, that follows a character we met in Graceling. It kind of goes back, I'm guessing, to that side of the world, or maybe is more about the connection between these two parts of the world. Who knows? Anyway, I'm excited. I thoroughly enjoyed Fire as well. I really loved getting to know her. She's a pretty cool badass character. I like some of the side characters as well. I thought the politics was super fun. I thought it was an engaging story. This one I only listened on audio. I don't have a physical copy, and they actually had one narrator for the whole story, and they didn't try to do it the same way they did Graceling on audio, and so it worked a lot better for me. And it's the same narrator that does Bitter Blue, so I'm very excited to listen to that one. So yeah, overall enjoyed it. I didn't like it as much as Graceling. Maybe I would also need to read this one physically to kind of give it the same, read it the same way maybe, to kind of figure out if I like one more than the other. But I didn't quite like it as much as Graceling, but I still had such a fun time listening to the story. I love this world so much. It's just such an interesting, fun world to explore. Interesting people, interesting abilities and powers, and to see those kind of converge in different ways, and how the politics is handled is really fun. Also, again, just kind of a super old school fun fantasy. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I also listened to Renegades by Marissa Meyer. So my hold came through in the library in April, so I listened to that. This is the third and final book in the Renegades series, and yeah, this one was fun. I think it was a fun conclusion. So I'll talk about the first one a little bit, since the third one is kind of far into the story. So you follow Nova and Adrian, who are on two different sides of kind of a superhero villain story that's going on here. So both groups have abilities or kind of supernatural powers, and there's kind of been a rift or animosity between these two groups, and the Renegades kind of see themselves as the heroes, and they kind of see the villains or anarchists as kind of the bad guys. And you know, Nova is an anarchist, Adrian is a renegade, and I won't really kind of talk much more about the plot, but I'll just say that the two interact and kind of get to know each other and find out that maybe all the anarchists aren't bad and all the renegades aren't good. And it's just a fun story. The writing is super simple, the story is super simple, and kind of predictable, but it's still just a fun, easy listen, and kind of was what I needed. Just something to like go back into a world that I've enjoyed listening to. My listening audio, they've got two different narrators, and I really enjoyed both narrators. And yeah, it was just fun to go back into that world. It was fun to follow Nova and Adrian again. There are some inevitable things that you know are coming. So yeah, again, I think it's not necessarily a super complex book. It's not a super deep book. I think it would be fun to kind of have something like this, but kind of really dig into, kind of get deeper with it. I think that would be fun. But it's just a very simple, kind of, I would say lighthearted. Like there are some moments, but it's overall just like a simple, lighthearted, fun story about, you know, heroes and villains and trying to find your place in the world, and trying to get to know other people who are different from you, and I'm kind of thinking about what kind of world you want to help build and what you can do to kind of help see that world come into fruition. So it was fun. It was fun. It's not necessarily a story that I think I'm going to reread. I'm probably going to, the only one I have physically is Renegades. So it's probably something I'll donate at some point when I get back to my apartment. Like I don't think I'm going to reread the series necessarily. Maybe I will someday, who knows, and if I do, I'll probably just get it from the library or re-listen to the audiobooks if I ever really get the urge to. Then I wanted to at least listen to an environmental book, since it's the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. I didn't get to all of the ones I wanted to listen to, but I did get to No Impact Man by Colin Beaton, and I listened to it on audio, and this one was really interesting. I thought it would be a little bit heavier on kind of what they actually did to kind of change. So it's a family that lives in New York City, and so it's, you know, the husband, wife, and they have a young daughter at the time. And so his idea was to kind of figure out if they could get to the point over the course of a year where they basically tried to have no or as little environmental impact as they possibly could. So they tried to reduce the amount of just trash and stuff that they were using, change their diets, change the way they did transportation, and kind of got around the city. And they did a lot of different things over the course of this year to reduce their environmental impact as a family. in New York City. And so, I mean, he definitely does talk about kind of what they did to accomplish those things. But I thought it would be a bit heavier on here's some practical advice or tips, and maybe there are kind of sidebars in the physical book that weren't read on audio. He himself narrates the audiobook, and maybe there are some sidebars or extra things in the physical copy that didn't get narrated that I could be missing. But it was much more about kind of the thought process that this family went through, how they made the decisions that they did, the impact that that had on them and their quality of life, and kind of the realizations that they had throughout this project about what they really wanted out of life. And they reprioritized a lot more and kind of learned a lot more about who they are and what they want out of life than they really thought that they would, just by reducing their environmental impact. And so it's much more about that and how they were and how they changed as a family than kind of the steps that they did to change. And he also has a blog that I haven't explored much. Imagine on this blog are kind of a series of more specific articles that kind of go into more in depth each kind of topic or kind of each thing and challenge that they had to overcome in terms of trying to figure out how to raise a daughter with no environmental impact, kind of how they changed their diet to be less impactful. And I assume there are more practical tips on the website. And again, there are some in the book, but I just thought the lessons they learned were really fascinating and really good to think about. And I'm honestly really glad I read the book. And I think it's going to be something that I think a lot about in the future and something that I go back to a lot. I think I honestly would love to reread the physical version and annotate and just kind of tab some things that I would like to think more about and kind of mull over more and just kind of think about how I want to think about those things and what parts of this I want to incorporate in my life going forward. So very thought-provoking book that I really enjoyed and would recommend to anyone to read and just kind of think about. Oh, I also listened to My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing on audio. This was a really fun audiobook. So this follows a husband and wife. They also have a couple of kids. So it's about their family, but the husband and wife kill people together. And so, the husband thinks that if you're literally murdering people with your wife, that there's not really anything that's kind of off limits to talk about or do. And so one day he kind of is surprised to learn that she has kept something from him regarding one of their murders. And that kind of turns things upside down, and they as a family are trying to navigate what's going on, and he's doing his best to kind of figure out what's going on and basically just to not get caught. And they're also in the midst of this trying to raise their kids. And it was a super interesting book. The twist wasn't terribly surprising to me, but I still liked the way that it was done. The writing style was good. It was very simple, easy to follow. I thought the narrators did a great job, which always helps with thrillers because I love listening to thrillers on audio. Yeah, I don't really think there's too much else to say about this one. I think it's kind of very similar to a lot of other thrillers to me, where I really enjoyed listening to it in the moment. I'm probably never going to think about it again. I'm probably never going to re-listen to it or reread it or own a physical copy of it. But it was really fun to listen to. So yeah, it was kind of fun to get a different perspective and kind of get a perspective from a couple that is killing together. Just super interesting. I also finally started the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson and read The Final Empire, and I listened to this on audio while physically reading it, which was amazing. And this one follows a couple people. So in this world, the magical abilities are kind of based on your ability to ingest metals and use them for power. So if you can ingest one kind of metal and use it for a particular ability, you're misting. But if you can ingest all of the kinds of metals that exist in this world, I think there are 10 of them, if you can ingest and use all 10 of them, then you are Mistborn. And it follows Ven is one of the first kind of main characters that you meet. And she's a 16-year-old girl who's kind of grown up in the slums. You know, basically the entire society has kind of gone to hell because the Dark Lord has been ruling for 1,000 years. So this kind of follows the question of like, well, what if the Dark Lord had won? And, you know, it's 1,000 years after the Dark Lord kind of won the battle for power. And so society has been reeling from that for 1,000 years. And you follow Vin, who's a 16-year-old girl who kind of lives on the streets. She does what she needs to survive, but it's a very rough life for her. So Vin kind of hangs around a crew that does different jobs for money, and kind of helps them out because she has this kind of ability to kind of make things happen, or people tend to be lucky when she is present as they're kind of doing their jobs. So they've kept her around for this ability because they want their jobs to succeed and they want to be lucky as they're doing these jobs. And what she doesn't realize is that she has that ability because she is a Mistborn. And you also follow Kelsier, who is another Mistborn. Kelsier and Ven's paths cross, and Kelsier kind of takes Ven under his wing as a fellow Mistborn and kind of trains her in her abilities. And he kind of recruits her to be part of his team of rebels that are going to take down the Dark Lord. And so it follows Ven and Kelsier and their crew of just amazing, fascinating people as they kind of infiltrate the kind of higher-ups in society. They kind of infiltrate the ministry and kind of the political machinations of this world. It's amazing. I loved everything about this book. I love Ven. I love Kelsier. I thought this world was super fascinating. It was super vivid. I could picture everything in my head really clearly. I love Brandon Sanderson's writing style. It's very simple but still really beautiful somehow. And he does such great character work. Like, I just absolutely and very quickly fell in love with these characters and really felt like I knew them incredibly well. I just wanted to protect them with everything that I have and hug them when they were crying and help them in their rebellion against the Dark Lord. Yeah, so I loved this book. I loved it so much, and I'm very excited to continue on in this series and get to the Well of Ascension very soon. This one was another Alice book. This one counted for charms. The charms prompt was to read a book that was mostly white on the cover, so that was that prompt. So I also did a reread of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I'm really not going to talk about it because I obviously loved it. It's a reread. It was the book that I used for the Care of Magical Creatures prompt, which is to read a book with a beak on the cover, or a creature with a beak on the cover. So I thought Buckbeak would be a perfect way to get that prompt. I also, for potions, and the prompt for potions to read a book that was under 150 pages, read the new erotica for feminists, and this was amazing. It was hilarious. This is just a super short book by a bunch of comedy writers who kind of reimagine everyday events and everyday things that happen to women, and try to reimagine them and how they would play out if everyone were feminists. And it's incredible. That's really all I need to or want to say about this. Just read it. It's fabulous and wonderful. It's super short. Like, it took no time at all to read, and it was, oh my god, it made me laugh. It made me like a little bit angry, and it was just exactly what I needed. So I would definitely recommend. So the last book that I read in the month of April was for History of Magic, and I believe this one was for the extra thing, the certificate that I went for, that was kind of the legal certificate that you could get for helping magical creatures. So I wanted to get my law certificate to be able to help the magical creatures that I'm saving as a magizoologist. And so my History of Magic, the prompt was to read a book with witches, and so I decided to read The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. I needed something like this in my life at the end of April, and so I really just wanted to listen. I knew I would probably be in the mood for it, so that was kind of what I planned on, and indeed I was in the mood for it. And this one follows, it's a middle grade fantasy, and it follows a town, and in this town, I think it's once a year, there's a child that is sacrificed, and they're left in the woods as a sacrifice to this witch, this evil witch that they believe lives in the woods. And there is indeed a witch in the woods, but she's not evil, and she doesn't really know how to convince these townspeople that she's not an evil witch, and they just continue to sacrifice one kid every year. She'll take these children and kind of go to the other town that's on the other side of the forest and put them in loving homes for people to raise these kids. And she feeds these kids starlight to keep them strong and healthy as she kind of gets them to new families. But there's one kid that she accidentally feeds moonlight instead of starlight. So this young child has magical abilities, and so she decides to raise this kid as her own. And there's kind of a little family that is kind of around. There's like a swamp monster, there's a little baby dragon, and there's Luna is the little girl's name, and this witch who kind of acts as the mother grandmotherly figure to Luna and the rest of these creatures. And it is just the most delightful and heartwarming story ever. So it just kind of follows Luna coming into her magic, and that ends up being more than she can handle and more than her grandmother can handle. So her grandmother tries to kind of help her contain that magic, but that process doesn't go well, and so Luna kind of needs to rediscover her magic and kind of save her grandmother, as her grandmother really tries to make sure that no one else is sacrificed, and that everyone can just and that all these kids in this town can just kind of stay with their loving families. The audiobook was wonderful. It was just such a delight. Like, I just had a smile on my face the whole time, and I fell in love with all of the characters. You love the witch, you love Luna and the other creatures that are around her, and you also follow a couple of people. You also kind of follow some people in this town. You follow the person who it becomes clear that his kid is going to be the next one that needs to be sacrificed, and so he is trying to figure out what to do as the witch is trying to figure out how to make sure that no other kid gets sacrificed, and just trying to change people's minds and trying to get people to kind of adjust their ways that they've become used to, and how difficult that can be. It was just I loved it. Just read it, please, just read it. But yeah, that was everything that I read in April, and it means I passed my OWLs, which is very exciting, so I'll be excited to continue with the newts in August and can continue on as a magizoologist and complete my training. Let me know if y'all have read any of these books. Let me know how your OWLs reading went if you participated, and what your career is. I'd love to know what everyone's career is. And thank you so much for watching. So be sure to subscribe below for more bookish content. I also have Instagram and Twitter linked below. That's where I like to hang out and chat with people, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!